the door?
Yeah, close it up.
Oh, you gotta go? All right. Sounds good.
Sorry for
No worries. Have a good morning there.
Thank you.
All right, we're rolling here.
Yeah. Should we start and stop?
Nah, it's okay. Okay, so we've been doing, well, Jake and I did a 12-hour sit, sunset to sunrise, this last Sunday, and we're going to try to do one of those once a week as a minimum. There are definitely hindrances that pop up when doing long endurance meditative activities. So we want to tackle as many of those as possible beforehand so that we can move through that with comfort. There's typically more important things to be focusing on in terms of like dukkha from a Buddhist perspective or suffering than the pains of the body. So if we can bypass those, you'll end up being able to practice a little more in depth. So for starters, posture, that's number one. We all tend to have different aches and pains that arise, circulation cuts off, that sort of thing. For this particular sit, because it's 12 hours, what we'll do is instead of locking ourselves into one position for the entire duration, I would encourage when you feel like you might be about to create injury, change the posture. Until then, do not. If you feel uncomfortable, that's fine. Things are trying to move and change, that's fine. There's going to be a lot of sensations that come up over the course of that time. Let those come, let them go. You want to apply your discernment for when you feel like now is the time to move to prevent injury. Okay, so that discernment is really important. The thing that allows us to get through the entirety of long duration practice, especially in the beginning, is mitigating choices, mitigating decision making. Every decision you make costs energy. Every time you present yourself with an option, that will cause a distraction and start robbing you of the focus required to maintain and to persevere and continue. So, if you're going, maybe you're the type of person that's cracking a joint all the time and it's a habit. We have these habits, you crack a joint. Sorry, that's coming through from you, that one. Some people crack joints all the time, or your knees or whatever. Just don't do that. Let that tension build. There's something in there, let that build, see if it dissolves on its own, see what's inside it. If you leave these habits and you stop yourself from acting them out, you'll find behind them, typically, there's a fair bit of karma that's going to burn off, these sankhara, psychosomatic scarrings. If we allow the habitual mind to act us out, we're never going to get inside of that habit. It will always be moving us. It will be controlling us. So we want to get inside that habit, and what you'll find is the absence of movement will start to create a, metric buck ton of internal anxiety, internal angst. And that's fine. It's okay. You have that? Good. You have that. That's fine. Keep sitting. Work with the object of your meditation. Return your mind there, and slowly that stuff will start to disappear. So this is one of the big reasons why in most meditative practices, stillness of the body is really, really important. Because if the body is not still, there are habits that are being acted out, and you can't go more still with the mind. Unless you have somebody who's transmitting stillness to you. But explore this, be as still as long as you can when seated, okay? And only to prevent injury do you move. So postures that I typically work through, we'll just talk the basic ones here. Normal, seated, shoulder width, okay? The butt on the edge of the chair, the sit bones on the edge of the chair makes a really big difference. As you sit back, typically you'll start to cut off circulation over time in the front, Okay, so sitting forward is helpful. Also, the legs are part of your body. One of the benefits of sitting in these types of positions is that they pinch the blood upwards into the torso and up into the head, which helps maintain concentration, circulation, wakefulness, alertness, so that you can practice. As a result of this element, a lot of us tend to forget the legs. They go numb, or if we're sitting like this, they go dead. If they don't go numb, awesome. But often the tensegrity disappears and they're disconnected from the rest of the system. So if we can connect the legs into the rest of the system, that will help all of you support your posture for much longer durations of time. And when I say all of you, I mean all of the you individually, as well as all of the you. So starting with this one, feet shoulder width, it's very comfortable for most of us. Now, what do we miss out on from being in this position? We miss out on these basic body locks, is what I think a lot of yogis call them. I've never studied that in any way. This is stuff that I've observed and figured out through trial and error, and mostly a lot of error. So this is a very neutral position. And as such, it doesn't employ these leverages that we can apply to the body to help sustain posture. So as you start to bring your legs into the position Barden talks about in his book, this creates a triangle. And triangles create double spirals, essentially, that help support you. So if you can do something like this, that alone will help fill your posture. Okay? And you'll feel that triangle if you can release into this. The key with the postural integration is releasing into it in a very, if you've done Tai Chi, a very Peng-like way, where you release and that inflates you. So by having a lock, that release is given a shape to form, right? That shape will form you and hold you. So you should be able to feel a difference here and just explore going back to this and feel the type of support that's generated organically between releasing into this posture, and then go back to here if you can, and releasing into this posture. Now for most people, as soon as we go to this one and we release with the quality of fullness, this posture supports, so this shape of the legs supports your posture. And so the more support we can have for a posture, just through the nature of the positioning, the easier it will be for the mind to remain stable on the object of your meditation. The less support for the posture, the more you're essentially stopping yourself from falling over. Okay, so the stability of the physical body will allow for increased stability of the mind. And this is why standing is a touch harder than sitting down like this. Sitting like this is easier than this. And these types of postures, or the full lotus, which Arthur can do and I cannot, it allows for a maximum stability of the body because of how it's locked into place. So the mind can really settle quite deeply, is what I found. So this posture, you might feel spirals this way, supporting you in relation to this triangle. If you're seated like Momo, Julia, or like Arthur likes to do, I find the spirals tend to go the other way in terms of how things inflate. Okay? So, look at your leg positions. When you're transitioning from one posture to another, do so quietly and without taking a break mentally. The change of posture is not a break. We don't want to give ourselves any distractions. Okay, so typically, if you've done Vipassana retreats, meditation retreats, where there's other people, someone switches their posture and they're all seated and everything's good, and then this happens, and this happens, and then this happens, and then like this happens, and then everything's gone. So before you change the positioning of your legs to prevent injury, release on it, so that it is not a compulsion. Okay, you are making a choice very freely, and do it slowly, maintaining the object of your meditation through the entirety of the change of position. Okay, during that change of position, don't start doing the clicks, don't start doing the popping. Change your position, continue. Okay, we want to stay in the mental space that we've created, what the frequencies we're working with, the object of meditation, everything tuned into that for the duration of the 12 hours. Okay, so that is the shape of the legs and the changing of the posture of the legs to prevent injury. You will start to become aware of various differences in sensation. Okay, and if you do a lot of this type of work for the endurance type practices, you'll tune into that stuff pretty quickly. Okay? Okay, so once we've settled on the various leg positions, you'll probably end up cycling through all of them at some point, just out of necessity. Once you've got that all squared away, we need to look at how to actually set the body up for that comfort. Okay, so let's all go into the Egyptian posture here. Location of the hands. We'll put them on the tops of the knees here. And I want you to go right up to the front of the knees instead of back on the thighs, because we're going to feel a difference here. Okay? And we'll get to the hands in a moment. So for the beginning, we have the sit bones, like we mentioned, already on the front of the seat. And what I want you to do here is tilt your spine forward. Not by rounding the back. Keep the release of the hips opening and rolling up, and then tilt things forward. Now in this position, if you suspend from above and release from above, right, you want to notice is an expansion that occurs inside the torso when you release. When the spine is tilted forward like this, it gives this quality an optimal potential to function. So if you lean forward a touch and release, the spine, you're not engaging the muscles of the back to hold you up in good posture. You're releasing into connection. The whole body is releasing, and this helps to support you drastically. So this is really important. As we start to do this, you're basically doing core workout at that point. You can get release to function in that capacity as well, but this will be typically more useful. So forward tilt of the spine, release. Feel how the torso gets held upwards. Now, back off that, go to crab posture again. And this time, when we find that, we'll tilt forward, and when we hit that release trigger and feel that support and expansion, I want you to recognize the relationship of this triangle from the knees through the hips as a part of that release process. So tilting the spine forward, tuning into the knees through the hips, and releasing, and feel how the hips, the joints themselves, there's space that's created. They become supported right through the knees. So the hips have just as much support, expansiveness, comfort as the torso. Everything is being supported through the process of release, and this is prime importance. Okay. So just observe that. Observe any changes in the comfort of the body. And unlinking and just going back to normal. Now we want to bring our mind through the knees to the feet, right? So same thing. Feel the connection of the feet through the knees, through this triangle here. The feet are now a part of this. Some people enjoy a little bit of a Wing Chun-esque type of thing here to help get a triangle through the feet as well. I find that happens here just by engaging the inside of the arch here through that inside ball of the foot. So you let that feel the weight in that part of the foot and release against it, and it will create that on its own. So feeling the feet on the ground, feeling how the weight plays through the balls of the feet. Feel the pressure where there's pressurization against the ground. and release in relation to it. So it doesn't go dead. That all that pressure of the feet on the ground helps to inflate the rest of the body. And you feel how this all reticulates through the facial system, that elastic web as a whole. If the flexibility is not present to bring the knees together, that's fine, as close as you can. So feel the feet in relation to the inflation of the entire elastic web, where the feet touch the ground, the relation of those pressures to the entire elastic web. Feel the connection of the knees and that triangle through the femurs and the hips and the pelvis, the relation of that, the entire elastic web of the support. Any imbalances, pains, tensions, they all get floated and supported within this system. The head is being floated like water supporting a boat. The whole body supported. Again, just like a boat floating in water. Okay, now looking at the hands and the arms. This is where we get into some other variations of these locking type mechanisms or these leverage type mechanisms. So maintain the structure we have through the legs and the body, and feel the hands on the knees. Now feel the pressure of the hands touching the knees, and from that point we want to apply the same release that we did with the feet, the pressure between the feet and the ground. So that pressure between the hands and the legs, you apply the same release as you did to the pressure between the feet and the ground. So that same inflation, that expansiveness from the hands touching the knees supports and floats the body, harmonizing the entirety of the body in this floating type stability. Good. Now with the hands, slowly angle the fingers in. So you have a triangle with the hands. Feel the pressure of the hands against the thighs and do the same thing, releasing in relation to that. And feel how that alters the structure and the ease of support within the body. How that alters how gravity plays through the elastic web. Any points of stagnation, of excess tension, allow those to harmonize through release into the elastic web. Nothing is collapsing. It's all filling through this space. Okay, hands back so the fingers are in line with the femurs again. And bring the hands back a couple inches up the thighs. Feel that pressure and release. Feel the difference in posture. Keeping the spine tilted forward, just enough so that when you release, the torso expands and the head, the crown gets propelled upwards. So you don't need to hold anything. There is no holding. everything is release, and that release in relation to just several specificities of structure create a posture that helps us to stabilize and support the long duration focus of the mind. And bringing the hands a couple inches closer to the pelvis. Find that connection, and again, feel the difference. Hands back to the front of the knees. Take the thumbs, lock them in against this joint of your index finger. Feel the relation of those pressures and release in relation to that. Feel a difference. Feel how things are supported differently, how gravity passes through the elastic web differently. And let's take this opportunity as well to explore letting discomfort just stand there, just be there, using the harmony of the system to dissolve those discomforts instead of gross movements of the body. So rather than, say, for me, twitching my shoulder to try to find comfort, I release that into the system. And that's all. Okay, changing the hands to whatever you call this hand position, thumbs touching. Feel the pressure of the thumbs touching each other, however light that may be. Feel the pressure of the hand, one on top of the other, however light that may be. Bring it off of the lap so it's floating, and release in relation to those points of contact. Feel any difference in stability, any difference in the ease with which you can sit in this posture, any difference in terms of how the fullness of that elastic web supports the body. Maintaining stillness within the posture. Any desire to move, ignore it. Dissolve that desire into this system. Lowering the hands till they touch the lap in the same mudra, but just with the hands touching the lap, and release again. Feeling the difference, the hands touching the lap in this position. Remembering the toes are part of the elastic web and part of the support system for your posture. The ankles and the feet, all the tissue running through the feet and the ankles is part of the support system. Releasing, inflating, stabilizing the mind, contributing to the stability and duration with which you can maintain that stability. Through the calves, the shins, all that tissue supporting through release, supporting you through release, through the knees, the thighs, surrounding the hip joints. That tissue runs right through the bones themselves, through the joints. You find that same release and support. Up through the pelvis. Feel through the coccyx, through the sacrum, and all the tissue surrounding those areas, the lower abdomen in its entirety. Become one connected mass through the entirety of the torso, through and around the scapula, all the ribs, through the shoulder joints themselves, up through the neck, releasing into that unified support, that unified tensegrity, all initiated from release. Up through the neck, through the head, the tongue, the jaw, the eyes, everything in the peripheral field. Peripheral field of all the sense gates. There is tissue movement related to the intent of each sense gate. All of that released in a way that supports your posture. There is a Buddhist saying, maybe it's a Zen saying, perfect mindset is perfect posture. Perfect posture is perfect mindset. And this applies to a degree until those skills are incredibly embedded within your mind perception. Including the entirety of the arms. So the whole body is unified in support. In support within this floating equilibrium, the whole body supported. The act of doing this will stabilize the astral body, and as a reflection of the stability and support of the vital and astral, the mental will stabilize. And the stability of these three bodies, the harmony and equanimity of these three bodies, will enhance our capacity to remain in Akasha, and through Akasha in whatever meditation object we choose. Note any compulsions to shift and move, and don't. Very simple. Just don't. Instead, what do? Release. All of those compulsions, on the other side of every compulsion is a lot of energy. A lot. All this energy that's being stored to act out habits. It's like all these reserves stored to act out habits. If that habit no longer is drawing from those reserves, they can be reallocated into the rest of the system and used at your discretion for what you choose. Okay, hands back to the thighs, opening the legs to shoulder width. Okay, so just taking a moment internally to observe any experiences you just had. Just a moment. As you notice the difference of this shape to the one you were just in. Okay, good. So you can chill for a sec if you want. Things that are included in compulsions of the body, compulsions of the mind. Start with things like you have an itch, you want to scratch your face, don't. You want to twitch, don't. Anything you want to do, don't. Just sit in stillness.
What about when you're trying to feel the energy and the energy wants to realign certain things to like micro movements so the energy can pass through cleanly?
Do it through release, not through you trying to find the correct alignment for that energy to pass through. What I found is that I'm always off. I can never do it refined enough. But if you allow that process of release in relation to everything, that will allow that to be a constant. That process of release, of surrender into that is a constant, which means kind of like when you're dropping into Akasha, it's like the point of reference is always moving. And so allow that to be what dictates any movement, as opposed to, I feel a stagnation here with this categorizing part of the mind, and now I'm going to do this. That will always be more gross than what the release will do. It will never be as subtle, and it will never have as far-reaching an effect in terms of dissolving, because this stuff, dissolving the habit of trying to find perfect posture or perfect alignment for energy to pass through. So those decisions I was talking about earlier, that applies to things that we, it's obvious the decision of, I'm gonna scratch my face and something like that. That's very clear, but when it's a decision that seems like it's good, that's also a decision. So we want to apply the same process of release. And you'll start to notice when you do that. So if I just tune in here, okay, so bunch of issues. If I start applying my mind to try to circumvent those, the place from which I am moving is the error. The place from which I am creating the change is already in error. It's in contrast to that release mechanism and to that unified support. So if you can initiate, or not even initiate, allow those things to occur on their own, that will give you a lot of peace within continued posture. But as soon as, this is what I found from years of a lot of discomfort, was as soon as I start that snowball of trying to get things perfect, the entire rest of your training session is trying to increase that perfection. And there's this cycle of tension, not necessarily with this, but of the mind in relation to trying to perfect the posture. So this comes down, and does that kind of answer your question?
What I meant was the energy's kind of dictating my movement rather than me getting a comfort zone. So I feel like there's a blockage, and then I release on it, and it just wants to click into place. Even when I'm holding this position, it just wants to go click, click, and the energy's dictating what position I'm supposed to be holding rather than me. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
that's.
what do you do then? Do you
I
still
think
hold
that's
the
good.
That's good.
If that's what's moving the position, if it's actually what's moving the position in subtle, very subtle degrees. So I found typically, movements more than this at a time are something getting involved as part of the process. Something's finding its way in there. So for example, I'll just go back to your thing, because that's an easy one. What you might end up doing is, okay, in that habit, it's still at play. And so that release might turn into something like this, right? As opposed to letting it start to bleed through the web, just a touch at a time, and then potentially that dissolving. So it comes down to discernment, and then just refining, so that you can really figure out when you're bullshitting yourself and when it's happening on its own. And what I've noticed with long-term stuff is that, over the course of an hour or two, Someone might go from this shape, and after an hour or two, they're kind of like this. Hour or two later, they're kind of on this side a little bit. There's these changes that are occurring as part of that balancing process. But use your discernment. That's a good way to go. So other reasons for not shifting and moving. If you're with a group, like we're all going to be doing this together, and not everybody is as dropped into Akasha to the degree where they're not going to perceive any of your stuff, that will draw people out. So if I'm sitting and I've come out a little bit and I haven't dipped back in yet, and I see like Arthur does this, gets up, starts doing this, I go, maybe I want to do that, right? Like that might be good. And then, okay, there's a whole cascade of internal events that take place which detract from going into the practice. So we want to not distract the people around us. That's also part of being still. There's obviously, like we mentioned, benefits for yourself. So things that rob people around you of the ability to stay tuned in, don't do those. So ideally, you will be not drinking. Consume liquids beforehand, sit, and try to sit through. If your concentration is on and your focus is set, within everything in the body is set, the object of meditation is set, and you're focusing, most of your pains won't exist until that focus starts to dissolve and devolve, and then once it's moving outside that point, it starts to hit all these potential points of pain and desire. So when you're in that space of deep concentration, the metabolism slows or basically stops. There's no need to piss or shit. There's no need to move. All the compulsions disappear. If that is not a stage that you're at yet, we will open up the ability to use the washroom so that you don't make a mess on your cushion. That said, note when that is a compulsion and a habit. I had a student, she hated, it took me a long time to get her standing, right? She didn't like it. And when she started to stand, she's like, every time I go to stand, I gotta take a dump, every time. Standing practice, 2 minutes, gotta go. It's like, and you didn't have to before at all? No. So that was a thing. I don't really want to do this, so what's a way for me to distract myself and make it okay, to give myself the okay to take a break from the internal angst that whatever the activity is, in this case it'll be sitting, is creating. There's an angst that's being created, we want to get away from it. So the body is freaking smart, and it'll go, oh, all right, maybe this will work. Maybe scratching will work, an itch. Maybe needing to take a crap will work. Maybe insert anything, and it'll run with that pathway. That tends to be how that stuff works. So that is where discernment comes into play. And that is a long time in practicing and training that to know, am I creating injury or am I moving honestly here? Do I actually have to use the washroom, or is it a distraction? Am I using the washroom simply so that I can walk around and do this en route to the bathroom and give a shake? Or do I actually need to use a washroom? So something as simple as that. Again, it is a decision, it is a choice. And what makes this the easiest is when you make one choice, the choice to sit until it's been decided upon that the sit will end. That makes it the easiest. As soon as you give yourself options, that is where we end up giving up. Okay? So we'll open that up. If you need to, use the washroom. Don't walk around for 10 minutes outside and try to dissolve the angst that's built up. Let that stuff be there and get back to your posture as soon as you can, so you can actually work through that stuff and burn off that karma instead of distracting yourself from it. Okay? So there will be, in terms of keeping the astral comfortable, we talked about the physical. In terms of keeping the astral comfortable, the emotional stuff more capable of sustaining this, we need to maintain that focus. when that we're robbed of that, that's when you start to hit the sides of this container of stillness. If you've done a fair bit of samadhi work, you'll be familiar with that point. When you're inside that point, there's no turbulence. Okay, so that's sort of the benchmark, is just go back to that concentration, release into the concentration instead of contracting into it. And that should help stabilize a lot of the astral stuff. The act of being in this posture in a released way will help stabilize your astral stuff as well. All right? Mentally, set an object, return to it. I like to use, the more subtle the object becomes, I like to attach it to a physical anchor because I find it gives me an easy return pathway. So I use this one here. I find it one of the best. Just feel where the breath is touching the bridge of the nose or the upper lip here on the way in and out, and use that as a return mechanism to more subtle objects of meditation. And then let go of this and just stay with the subtle object. And then if you lose it, use this to return real quick. Okay? So the return mechanism is really important. So in terms of distraction, time. You can release time, like we learned to move into the astral. That is one way to do it with those cycles of breath that Mark likes to use, the release of time. A way to very naturally release time, because you have to, is long endurance practice. If you don't release time, you're not going to be too happy. So the release of time comes as a byproduct of the duration. This release of time, we want it to be absolutely total. And what you'll start noticing is, I started calling it a long time ago, just the tension of time. You'll really start to notice that. Your mind latches on. How long has it been? When did we start? How much longer? From here, then, until now. And there's all these compartmentalizations. And a compartmentalization is tension that are created in relation to time. So you want to allow that time to fully and completely dissolve, which means no phones. Do not bring phones. I will have mine on airplane mode. An alarm will be set for 7 a.m. And when that goes off, we're done. Until then, we're not. So no time devices, no watches, no anything. You do not want to be checking the time. Every time you check the time, you are resetting your relationship to time, which interferes with your capacity to destroy that relationship to time, which is part of release. If time is attention and we are using release as a mechanism to touch a meditation object or do anything else, the attachment to time needs to be let go of and put aside entirely. Okay? So anything that has like an hourly beep or anything like that, don't want it around. Anything that you can habitually reach to and look at the time, that is a really common habit we have. You'll just do it subconsciously and you won't even notice sometimes. That's why you're like, what time is it? Oh, what time is it? I just checked, I can't remember. But it's so habitual, we don't even check the time when we're checking the time. So no phones, no time devices. There will be one, like I said, my phone, it'll be away from me, and there will be an alarm set. Okay? So you'll find in relation to time, a lot of anxiety can build up, a lot of tension can build up. Release on it. Just pretty simple. It's, easier said than done. Okay? You'll start to notice that there, especially in relation to time, you're fighting yourself, right? You're in conflict with yourself. And in order to do this with ease, you have to choose that all of you wants to be doing this right now, to be fully in it. Let the tension of the fight in your kidneys go and just soften out, settle. That is something you will be moved into on your own as a byproduct of it being freaking exhausting to be in conflict with yourself all the time. Okay? So that's important. There's no time devices. Things like resting. Don't. Resting. I'm tired. That's another habit of distraction. Don't. When you lean back, I'll just lean my back while I'm sitting. You're going to fall asleep, right? It's going to happen. As soon as you do this, you start doing the dipping bird thing, right? And you just, right? It's all night, right? It's when you're used to being asleep. The posture is very important for keeping you awake. So we'll be keeping the fan running, and I would suggest wearing minimal layers, almost none. If you're a touch cold, that is ideal, because when you do this, you won't be generating nearly as much heat and you will get cold. So what I found the other night when we were doing that sit was that for comfort, I had to have good posture. And so I ran that by Mark. He thought it was a good idea as well. So we'll do that. Try not to bundle up too much. We want to find ways to force the good habits in the beginning, and being a touch cold is a really good one for posture. When you do this, this happens a lot as well. You're just tired, right? You're cutting off blood flow to your brain, and just by doing this, you won't notice it because it'll take 5 minutes, but suddenly after 5 minutes, you will be alert and awake again. And if you do this, after 5-10 minutes, you will be tired, and this will be very difficult, and you'll want to fall asleep. Okay? Things to avoid. Tricking yourself under the guise of discomfort and your sore back and this, that, and the other thing, that you need to lie down for a minute just to open things up, right? Like things are tight, it's just gonna feel real good to lie on the floor for a second or lie on the couch, and then you start snoring and I throw a pillow at your head. So upright. This is not, I'm not inviting you to hang out and fall asleep next to me while I'm practicing. I'm inviting you to practice with me. Practice, right? Stay with it. When you notice your will waning, you need to find a softer will. When you notice, very common, that you go, oh, like I can't find light, you offer, a prayer to the Brotherhood of Light or the Path of Light. I can barely connect in, there's almost nothing there. When I drop into Akasha, I can't feel it. And most of what we feel, basically anything we're feeling with that stuff, is a reflection, like Marcus mentioned, through the mental, astral, or physical. It's not the actual thing. So through just the simple exercise of a long endurance practice, you can start to notice, oh, okay, that's still got to be there, right? How do I connect to it? What am I observing in relation to that that's not actually that thing? And through that, can I refine my connection to the actual frequency and not my interpretation of how it's being expressed through the mental, astral, or physical? So that is very common as well. You're not bad, you're not getting worse, you are refining, hopefully. Right? You never know. But that's the idea, is it's a constant process of refining. All right? So, oh yes, part 3. So, no moving around, minimize bathroom breaks, obviously, noticing habits, no time stuff. If you decide to join us, you cannot leave. Okay? For every person that gives up, that weakens everybody else's will, especially if it is the first time you're doing something like this and you are having to engage a lot of will, like strong will, to stay a part of it. As soon as one person leaves, that introduces a decision to you. Someone else left, maybe I can. So if you feel like you are unable to work through the whole duration of the night, don't come. We'll apply Yoda rules, do or do not try. Trying is in opposition to success, just by the nature of the word and all the connotations involved with it and the separation that's created through trying. So don't try, just do it. If you feel like you're going to be faltering and you think you won't be able to sit through the night, don't come, because it will, for anyone who's popped out at that moment and they're not deeply absorbed in their object of meditation, it will detract from their ability to continue. So these are all things I'm trying to implement for the ease and success of everybody, so that we can all work through this So those are 3 like main things in terms of ground rules. No breaks, no fidgeting, no time stuff. We want to no like drinking water, okay, unless you think you're going to pass out, but I hesitate to even offer that because as soon as we have that again, it's another thing. Maybe I'm going to pass out. I'll just like drink some water and it's break time, right? No mental breaks. You will find yourself wanting to take mental breaks. No mental breaks. No finding comfort. Release. Let comfort evolve. The meditation object we used last time was buffering light with akasha. So sort of create light and akasha, working the 2 simultaneously, and just undifferentiated light so that it's free to express through you however it needs to, so that we're not imposing ourselves on what might want to come through us through light and through akasha. We can always try another one with something specific and working a frequency specifically, or a Kabbalah letter or something, where we're all doing that. But I think for this first one, it is best for it to arise individually in terms of what's going to come out of this. Okay, I think that's most of the things that were in my mind. Is there any questions? Yes?
You talk about eyes.
Yeah.
Where you're looking or where your eyes are.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want your eyes still, whether they're open or closed, they're still. The peripheral field is open and soft. Where specifically, in terms of up or down, you don't want your eyes looking to the left or looking to the right. So the release process through the body, the peripheral field of the eyes plays a massive role in how that connection and harmony unfolds through the rest of the body, right? So you want to release the eyes into that system. And for some people, it'll be down a touch, some people up a touch, some people straight, somewhere in that trajectory in terms of where the eyes end up settling. But you don't want the eyes wandering around. You notice if you've ever taught classes and you're working on stillness, the person whose eyes are moving around inside their eyelids and stuff, they're usually not so focused. So we can try this. Just tune in, feel the peripheral field of the eyes. This is the musculature of intention. If you, with your mind, press out. So let's hit our full posture and do this correctly. So harmonize and release in relation to any pressures you feel on your body. The spine slightly tilted forward so that release can support you upwards. The legs are involved in this process of release and connection. And now, with your mind, just reach out to your left and feel the changes as the intent goes to the left. Feel the changes in tension of the musculature and the tissue of that's connected to the eyes, to the peripheral vision. And then let that mind that's pushing out to the left center back right into the center of the skull. And then send that intention out to the right. Intend hard. The eyes do not move. If the eyes are open, the gaze is still, but you're intending to the right, and this creates tension through the peripheral field, through the eyes, through the structures around the eyes in a specific way. And release that, letting it snap back into center. And now, what I want you to do is intend at a 45-degree angle with both eyes outwards at a 45-degree angle. The gaze doesn't wander. You intend out in that wedge and feel what happens to that peripheral field. Now release in relation with that peripheral field and let the eyes harmonize into the body. So release that intention and feel how the eyes come into equilibrium. The peripheral musculature and tissue of the eyes comes into equilibrium and is released into the support system. dropping into Akasha. Raising the Akasha above the crown. As you raise that Akasha above the crown, notice the relationship of the peripheral field of the eyes to that Akasha, to its location above the crown. Changes, alterations in the tensegrity of that landscape, and harmonize. The whole body needs to harmonize the Akasha above the crown through release. The eyes become a part of the system. Their location, where they are looking, can only be correct at this point. And connecting to the path of light. Notice how the light plays through the harmony of the system. Still with some soft focus on how the eyes are functioning. Any imbalances in the peripheral field, we release those into and as a part of the harmony and support of the entire system. Connecting to a point of light originating higher above the crown, and noticing any changes in that peripheral field, any changes in how the eye subtleties of the eye structures change in relation to upping the height of where you're connecting to light. And this is where most folks will notice an upward wedge type of relationship with the eyes, and where you'll get that eyes coming together and focusing upwards. This creates another type of lock and wedge that can be used to support and sustain you. And maintaining the connection to light. Opening the eyes. And any other questions? Yes?
What's your perspective on maintaining one single meditation object for the 12 hours versus allowing a small degree of flexibility with the meditation object?
One's going to be a little harder. The keeping one the whole time. The allowing can be a one object in terms of the amorphous nature of staying in that state of allowing Akasha and light to dictate what's happening. So you can use the amorphous nature of allowing or surrender as an object of meditation itself. It's a very different and more open type of perspective and feeling than locking on to one specific one. What I found trying to do one just very rigidly was that, and this could have been my own health issues, I was just blasting myself into the ground. I was just wiping me too hard. And that the using surrender as an object was allowed for anything, the most correct thing to happen. Whereas if I choose an object beforehand, what's choosing the object? And then there's that whole cascade of questions and events in terms of the relationship to that object of meditation.
So are you saying that you would suggest connecting with Akasha and light and let that dictate where the attention goes?
That would be my suggestion for especially your first time trying a longer duration sit. Once you've developed proof of concept for yourself and faith that you can do it, and that's, as Mark would say, a self-fulfilling prophecy of success, then play with other objects. I find also I just never know what I'm going to learn or what's going to come through, and that I'm shortchanging myself if I try to dictate beforehand what I want out of it. Because one thing that tends to happen is you really start chipping away at perceptions of self. And you might have chosen this object, but the part of you that chose it suddenly dissolves. And then you're like, what do I do now? So I definitely would suggest using surrender in relation to light and akasha as an object. And then for future ones, I'll run it by Mark and see if he thinks anything specific would be super useful. He thought that was a good idea when I mentioned it to him, the akasha and light. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. Does that help a little? Okay, yes?
A couple of questions.
Go for it.
So with the, you said you don't get tired during the duration of the sit.
So you don't get tired?
You don't get tired.
Yeah.
So you don't need to do like a pre-nap to like set up for it or anything like that.
Okay. You will likely get tired, right? You will likely get very tired. We don't want that to overtake us, which is why we prepare for that with posture or with a little cold stuff to inhibit that, why we won't rest if we're tired, so that you can start to realize that fatigue is the tension of the mind. And as soon as you release that tension of fatigue, and that release of the fatigue is in relation to the harmony of everything else, on the other side of fatigue is a lot of focus and a lot of potential. So I'm not saying you won't get tired, especially if you're letting your posture go a little bit. Okay, you probably will. But there's a part of you beyond fatigue. There is awareness beyond sleep. I have one friend who, he's literally snoring, and then he'll answer in a conversation. He's like lying on the bed, and you're having a conversation with him, and when he needs to answer, he answers, but he's asleep. It's real weird. So fatigue is definitely a thing that will arise. Poor posture will make that more difficult. Now, with fatigue and posture, this is really important. When you have poor function of the cellular processes, mitochondrial processes, and energy production processes, your posture sucks. Your tissue has no tensegrity. When you're tired, it's essentially the unlinking, right? When you're tired and exhausted, like you never see anyone, I'm just fucking exhausted today, right? Like, I'm so depressed, oh my God. It's that there's a lethargy. There isn't energy to support the tissue. So life force, chi, inflates the tissue, supports it. Energy supports the tissue. As you start to get tired, there will be less energy to support the tissue, right? Due to that decrease in energy that's supporting the tissue, it will be much harder to maintain good posture, and you'll find yourself incorrectly forcing yourself to be upright. And what we want to do is, within that space of the things you're typically using to energize yourself, find something else. So rather than using this to energize yourself, we started this with using release to create connection. Release, not hard stretch, release. And you'll find softer and softer mechanisms to energize yourself. Also, there are parts of you that don't want to be doing it anymore, that don't want to deal with the angst of whatever karma needs to burn off. And a real easy way to get around that is fatigue. To a lot of people, depression and stuff, there's stuff they don't want to think about. I'm not saying this is the only cause, but there's things that it's too painful to go through. So chronic fatigue type stuff or depression, that stuff can arise because now there's a wonderful excuse to not engage that stuff. Now, I'm not saying that's the only issue. There's a lot of other stuff. Health is super complicated. But again, it's something that can detract and be a distraction, the fatigue. Is that useful?
Yeah.
Question number 2 and 3 and 4?
No, I just have 2. When would you suggest you eat and drink so you don't need to use bathroom?
Everybody's got different metabolisms. Some people do an Epsom salt cleanse, and within 2 hours, that cleanse is going through them. I do one of those, it's like 16 hours later, which really gets in the way of plans for the next day. So you want to learn those things for yourself. I can't really give you a good advice on what your metabolism is going to be. I like to have a couple sips of water just before I settle in, because I know that that's just a good thing for me to have. Some people like to fast for a couple days before starting. Some people, like the last one I did, I ate a couple hours beforehand. Preparatory stuff, I stacked in all the bodies, all the akasha of the Kabbalah in each body. So in vital, astral, mental, akasha, I did simultaneously. So I would run, say, E, and then maintain it in a sphere and in the bodies. So field, breathe, E, while then running orange, umlaut, whatever's all the other ones, and U and all those. And I found that was a really easy way to soften and prepare everything to settle in really nicely into the meditation. Any other questions? Yes?
You should work in the evening. Is it possible to come a bit later or not?
If you can organize your work to finish beforehand, once we start, we want to start all together. And again, it's like an alleviating distraction for everybody, especially close to the beginning. What happens, because we're refining this process so much, is that we tend to open up spaces where we haven't been aware before. So we think we're in stillness, and then you open up deeper layers of activity. And then that dissolves and stabilizes, then we open up deeper layers of subconscious activity. And when we hit these deeper layers that we're not used to, the will can't touch it, we have no control. So at that point, what can happen is, you walk in a little late, and then someone else is stuck ruminating on you walking in late for like 2.5 hours, just because their will can't touch that space where that activity is taking place. Now you can use the approach of, well, that's their lesson. But we can also use the approach of, well, why allow the opportunity for that to be somebody's lesson when there's other stuff that might be, more of interest in relation to the practice. So if you can reorganize just that one evening, or maybe do some classes a little earlier the next day and the day before or something, that would be a good thing. Okay. Anything else? I think I covered most of the stuff. Anything I'm missing that you guys think is useful to discuss here? Oh yeah. Can I move? Okay, so I fluctuate between this, Burmese. I'll do this on the floor because this chair is a little wacky. So if you haven't done much of these, legs not overlapping each other, like not here. So this is good. For these types of postures, everyone's got weird freaking hips and stuff, so you sort your stuff out. I like to be slightly raised. But anyway, this type of posture, if you go into this, same thing. Touch, connect, use any type of mudra or connection to explore the postural integrity and that harmony. You'll notice just a subtle shift of the mind will create a different type of spiral going up or down. These tend to create this, whereas the Egyptian tends to create this, okay? But it's really just a shift of the mind, very subtle, and you'll reverse it instantly. So one here, obviously the other side, same one, half lotus, and half lotus the other way. If you can full lotus, I can't, I think you can. Just those are the options. So that gives you, like, even if you're doing just these two, the two Burmeses, left and right, and sitting on a chair, legs open, and together with the knees. There's 4 options, and that should be enough to create some comfort.
Yeah, in this position here, at what point would you ever be about to cause injury?
Some people with nerve pain, right? So like I have nerve issues. Some people, very, very tight hips. This can be really hard. I couldn't do this when I first was trying, and it took 10 days of a retreat I was running for myself. So only 16 hours a day for 10 days, and you can be here too. So really tight hips, it can actually create confusion and make it more difficult when stuff's trying to open and it's just too tight. And I find nerves running down here can start to act up. Even in these positions, legs can fall asleep, right? People's legs can fall asleep here, and sometimes my left leg will fall asleep like in these positions, and there's nervous imbalances, structural imbalances, blood flow imbalances. So when you fall asleep, when you feel like it's time and you've released on it and it's an honest preventative measure, alter your position. You might alter slowly, right? Release on it, see if it makes a difference. Release on it. Maybe that's all it takes to get blood changing. And different bodies have some really wacky things, like bodies are real complicated. So again, like your discernment on injury. Back stuff in this, people get back stuff, or if your hips aren't prepared, you start doing this to compensate for the inability of the pelvis to actually straighten out. So this will happen, so you feel like you're sitting upright, things like that. And those types of postures often end up in some weird mixture of hyperflexion and hyperextension in different places. The harmony of the tensegrity of the body in relation to release is your barometer for success. Surrender as the mechanism for all of it is your barometer for, I don't know if it's barometer, but that's what you want to apply for all of it. If you're within surrender with your object of meditation and in relation to the vital, the astral, the mental, it's really hard to fuck it up, right? So aspects of will, aspects of the mind will be getting in the way constantly. And you release those. If you have trouble getting a full, knees down or whatever, that's fine. I did this for years and used the same process of inflating. And this is a part of the posture as opposed to those going dead, okay? I find the variation between the legs being open in this type of seated posture and this to be more than enough variation to keep me comfortable. This last sit was the first time I've actually explored changing posture and not just deciding on one for 3 hours or 6 hours or whatever the duration was going to be, and just getting to the other side of the discomfort. And it made it incredibly easy to get through the 12 hours just by noting when it felt like I was going to rip an ankle off and then change. So between this and this, you should be able to find some comfort. Yes?
Any experience with Barton's suggestion to use a belt?
Yes. Yes. It is very relaxing because something else is holding your knees together. Jake was using something around your legs, I think. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it really helps to cool my mind. Because, for me, it's really hard to keep these legs together as well. Maybe it's just this chair, but I just find that hard. I also have really thick thighs, so that might engage my muscles too.
Right. You saw those waffles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what Jake was using. That type of thing. So I've experimented with tying my legs together. I've experimented with binding them in these positions. What it does is it creates a support foundation, same as what you're doing here. So you can use the hands and their relation to the legs to create the same binding effect, which will give you more room for progression and change and subtlety. Sometimes with the binding, people do too tight, they cut off circulation. I mean, that seems like an obvious thing to not do. I found it can obstruct things a little bit in terms of creating, it's like an external lock, and it can interfere from the evolution of learning about all the internal ways you can be working things. But if you feel like it's helpful, go for it. Definitely not opposed to that. With things like getting your legs comfortable, you'll notice how you set the fascia makes a difference. So on two layers, one is just physical and one is how the mind relates to it. So if I push the flesh in and sit down, now my legs are wanting to be pushed out because I've created leverage in that direction. If I pull the flesh out and sit down, right, and you just feel how the hips roll in relation to that, now there's more help. So you can explore that type of stuff. There is an equanimity of mind within the body that takes pain and balances all these little things and allows for absolute comfort. If you stay in that state, typically I'm fine. I've never been in that state and created injury. It's only when I've come out of that state and been unable to get back in and try to will my way forward that I create injury. I ripped this ankle out years ago, sitting, just like, I'm gonna do it. Like ruined knees and stuff. Like you don't wanna hurt yourself at all, but there is this really fascinating harmony that you can touch into once the mind stabilizes that will support you, it will sustain you, and it's just easy. One hand position I used because I was getting chilly was this, right? And same thing, settle in, harmonize it. Right hand over the heart, left hand over the lower abdomen. And I found that I moved into this quite naturally some years ago. If you're feeling the need to shift around for a specific purpose. Again, change of mudras, change of stuff, let that happen as a result of release, not as a compulsion. When you hit that state, the equilibrium that I just discussed, you'll find that you'll remain in a posture for exceptionally long periods of time, and you won't notice it until, say for this, when I went to shift up, this wouldn't undo. Had been like that so long that it was like kind of stuck, and it took a little while for that to open up. So however long it takes for everything to lock up, and no perception of it at all, no discomfort. And then as soon as I attached to that, it stayed. As soon as I applied that equilibrium to that, it was instant opening into the next position. So if you want to bind your legs, go for it. So there's positives and negatives to these natural binding mechanisms or natural locks or leverage points that help support you. Positives are all the ones we discussed with supporting, right? That energy is going to support you, help you concentrate, wonderful things. Downside, a lot of monks who get really good at comfortable in the postures, they can fall asleep in them. And that's one benefit of a lock in your posture, is that you can pass out and the posture holds you up. So even if you're sitting and you start snoring, and I hear it, I'm beaming a pillow at you. Wake you up. If pillows don't work, Dinesh has permission to go to water. And if water doesn't work, we'll go to fire, and that should wake you up. So fatigue, lethargy, distraction. Everything, distraction. Release, surrender to your object of meditation. Harmonize in surrender to your object of meditation. If you need to use some degree of samadhi, of harder concentration, surrender into samadhi instead of contracting and forcing yourself into samadhi. Surrender to samadhi as a doorway to your whatever you want to go to. As the evening goes on, it will be more and more and more difficult to force yourself to do anything. We were talking about the fatigue and the collapse of the posture. You've got to tune in to something different. Keep releasing, 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 releasing. Find that harmony. That collapse, you've lost that harmony. And that's one thing you'll start noticing as the duration goes on, is you just go, oh, I can't do it. Okay, but what can't do it, right? These are the Mujiji-esque type questions. Who can't do it? What can't do it? What is the thing that's viewing that? Where is that action coming from? Where is the thought coming from? Go beyond it. How? Surrender. Not obliquely, not obtusely, but to something specific, to your object of meditation, to the harmony and equilibrium and support, to the qualities that are going to support you. Because you can, for like a martial metaphor, you can surrender to a punch in the face, or you can surrender to punching somebody in the face. You want to be surrendering for your success and positivity, not surrendering into the lethargy, into the distraction, into the habits. Okay? Any other questions? Things I missed here? I think we looked at binding, we looked at eyes. All the sense gates have connection to your elastic web, there's essentially a peripheral field for all the sense gates. You want all of those to harmonize. If you're having trouble settling in, harmonize the eye gate, find the akasha of it. I mean, just akasha, that's an easy way to harmonize it. Harmonize all the sense gates into supporting the system. Everything you're surrendering is surrendering into support of what you're doing, into support of your connection with your object, into your support of your relationship with samadhi, if that is your object as well. Anything else?
So can you flex between eyes open and closed? I don't know if someone already asked.
No, that wasn't asked yet. I have no problems with eyes open or closed. Once again, it is the mechanism through which that change is occurring. Some people, I went through a phase where I had to do eyes open because whatever habits I'd created, my right eye would sink down and my left eye would go up, and I had vertigo and all kinds of weird stuff. So I had to keep my eyes open so that I could really notice when that was happening, and then learn to flip that field just constantly. So eyes closed for most people is easier, right? And it's not that easier is the goal, it's just we want to maximize the time and energy we spend on, in this case, akasha and light, and allowing the maximum lessons to come through from that, as opposed to, oh, like my eyes are closed, I wish I could open them, I wish I could open them, I wish I could open them, and then like 3 hours later, I wish I could open them, I wish I could open them. You're like watching yourself just in this loop. There's lessons in there, of course, there's great lessons, but why not allow those lessons to come through in relation to akasha and light? Just the motivating impetus of change, make sure it's honest and not distraction-based.
Are we doing this in darkness or with the lights?
Darkness. So the fan will be on, the only lights will be coming from outside, wherever those happen to be. Lights will be off. And yeah, like I said, once we start, we start. If you can't be here on time, sorry. When we finish, we finish. Enjoy the odd relationship that happens to yourself and to time. It's kind of like, it's really, I love it. I think it's super fun. That's why I do these like long things. I love dropping in, and that feeling where when you just don't come out, is you're so settled, nothing's popping you out, and you're just kind of there. One thing, I guess I should mention, in Taoism, they have this saying, to sit and forget. And it is the first stage of development, where you can sit with no movement for, I believe it's 4 or 5 hours, 3 to 5 hours, something like that. And you're just comfortable with sitting. There's no craving or aversion to anything. You just sit, basically like a robot powered off, and you're good, right? You're not meditating, you're not focused on anything, you're not watching anything, you're just sitting and you're in total comfort with that. That's okay, but it's not meditation, it's just, you're just chill with sitting. So we want to be still connected, surrendering to that connection. And as the evening goes on, the surrender becomes more and more important because you don't have the energy to just to will it all the time, to will the connection. So the surrender becomes a really important mechanism. Cool. Anything else? No?
What's your take on earplugs?
Oh, 1 second there, Hank. What was that?
What's your take on earplugs?
Earplugs. I've used them and I've not used them. With the sense gates. So one of the benefits of in Barden's system, where he actively works each sense gate, is that you develop control of that sense gate. So there's all the clairvoyance, all the clair spectrum that you can help develop through those exercises. But there's a very interesting relationship to control of the sense gates, which means if you've developed your hearing sense gate and you can visualize or envision through the ear gate and create the sounds with your mind, you can, and fabricate them, you can defabricate them. And so I've explored earplugs, and that's fine if you want to do that. You can also explore letting go of the compartments, releasing the part of your mind that compartmentalizes what sound means. So when somebody's speaking, I had neighbors who would always sit outside my window and be yammering while I was practicing. And so I learned to do that one where it was no longer, I couldn't understand it anymore. It was just stimulus, right? And you get in between the sense gate itself and the perception of the stimulus. So you get between the stimulus hits the sense gate, then there's a whole cascade of events that take place. Then eventually, depending on your level, you have perception of that stimulus. If you're really good, perception and stimulus are instantaneous. If you are not still working on that, then the time between stimulus and when that perception arises, that can be many moments, and it's in that space where all these habits of fabrication occur in terms of what something means and some emotion from 30 years ago that's connected to it and blah, 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 blah. So through refining awareness in relation to the sense gate and refining openness and concentration in relation to the sense gate, you can defabricate all of that stuff and it's no longer an issue. That said, it's probably pretty cool to do this in a float tank.
Maybe you can have a word of my use for earplugs is not so much about like the stories that I fabricate, this work I've done for the most part, but it's more like when I tune deeper and then there is like everything is quiet and let's say it's the middle of the night and then there's a car passing by, the fluctuations from quiet to loud tends to bring me back. Yeah, the closer your awareness can be to the perception of stimulus, can be to the stimulation of the stimulus, the more immediate your return will be, and the less likely you'll be pulled out. So when the wave, if you're looking at that space between stimulus and perception through whatever sense gate, the wave builds, right? So if there's this much space for it to go through that many moments, you don't notice that wave until it's freaking massive and cresting. When that hits you, that's gonna take you out. If you're here though, your perception and stimulus are so refined, that wave, it's nothing, and it's gone, like immediately. And they've done some studies with returning to an object of concentration, and most people take a minimum of 7 seconds for their mind to return. On meditators, I think at longest it was 2 seconds, and if you just keep refining that so that the wave is non-existent if it doesn't have time to build. And so that's one of the things that allows interesting relationships to speed and time, your relationship with time and speed and how fast things are moving, and how easily something disturbs you from your center or from a sense of equilibrium. It can be because of your relationship and your perception space in relation to stimulus in any of the sense gates. So
that's one thing you could work on, or you can earplugs and not work on that. I found it was really useful because I don't always have earplugs, and sometimes, like when we were doing that sit Jake, was there like a party going on? There was some real loud stuff for a real long time, and the first moments of it, you encounter your own entitlement, your own delusions of self, like, you're disturbing my meditation, right? And you're just like, okay, that's ridiculous. So you have to defabricate your sense of self, and that happens as a byproduct of endurance work. Yes?
Sorry. Did you use any deities to help you, or like any sort of invocations to help with this process?
I did not. Did you?
Yeah, I did at first to run light and Akasha, but then eventually there isn't even a reservoir for the deities to work with. So you just have to surrender to the process completely. And like, so first I was, invoking like the master of the sun spirit to work through me, and I saw like some of the archangels of the sun spirit, and I said, okay, cool, they can help me get through this and make this more stimulating. But then 3 hours and 4 hours in, it just gets less and less, and then 5 or 6 hours in, there's nothing to burn.
And it wasn't until then that you actually started doing it really well, and you settled in.
Yeah, it's like when I was able to really surrender, you're like, oh fuck.
So I would suggest don't do anything other than emptiness and what results from that in terms of light. It's like, it changes what's happening a fair bit. And it seems to be that, when Mark had a video where he's like, if you want to boil down the entire spiritual path to one word, it would be song, release, surrender. Like one of those, whichever has the best connotations for you. And that's really what it is. But it's surrender to something, not to, your bad habits and stuff. So if you're having trouble, you can play with all the things but I would say that that's going to be part of distraction for this particular version of the exercise, and apply surrender. Always apply surrender. That'll keep you on track. If somebody is like, if you're going to have emotions, release on them. Do not express them. That is distraction. If you end up crying, that crying is going to happen. Don't indulge it. Right? No one cares about your feelings. Don't indulge your feelings. You indulge your feelings, they grow. What you put your attention on when you meditate, you notice very clearly and quickly what you put your attention on grows. Right? So if you put your attention on your pain will grow physically. If you put your attention on your pain emotionally, that will amplify. And you don't want to create circuits of amplification for cathartic release, where you're running through the same trauma and doing the same release, and you feel, oh, I feel so good after, I got it out, and blah, 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 but you're doing the same shit for 20 years, right? Release on it, surrender on it, that's it. Don't indulge it. Again, in terms of detracting from everyone else around you, if you, it's real hard to stop yourself from crying if it's a legit thing. So don't clamp in, surrender it. If you surrender, you will not be continuing to cry for very long. If you continue to cry for long, you are indulging yourself. If you have a feeling for more than 90 seconds, that's indulgence, okay? That's like a good rule of thumb. You're just indulging yourself, you feel good about it. Use that as an opportunity to defabricate sense of self. You have attachment and entitlement, you feel important because you have emotions, and emotions give you some sense of self and some sense of grounding. They're just emotions. On the other side of emotions is a freedom from them. And once you hit that point, it makes other people's emotions very entertaining, because it's just like a puppet show. Like, you're just watching somebody act out their emotions. And you're like, oh, Like everyone starts to look like a 3-year-old, right? So if you're having emotional stuff, you have your emotional stuff, surrender it to light, like Mark mentioned in the Qigong workshop, dissolving it up to light. Or if you're just surrendering it, that stuff will tend to disappear on its own. If somebody is having an event or an episode, whatever you want to call it, don't do healing on them. It's their shit. They can deal with it. Okay? Your job is surrender. Don't distract yourself from your process of surrender by, okay, I'm going to reach out to that person and, you know, demagnetize that for them and that stuff. The way you are supporting them for this exercise is by maintaining what you're doing and creating a space in which surrender is what is occurring on all levels. And it's the unification of all of us in that space that is the support mechanism, not the small-minded, you know, little wizardry things, which can be very effective and have their place 100% for healing. But I don't want to steal or rob anybody of the opportunity to encounter their karma and allow it to burn off and watch what happens as it burns off. I don't want to rob anybody of the joys of discovery and change that come from that process. So somebody's having an episode, it's their shit. You support them by going deeper, release deeper, surrender deeper, connect with your surroundings, not the individuals. It's the whole space, and you get out of the way. Okay? Mental breakdowns and that kind of stuff. It's real easy to train yourself into having mental breakdowns, to train yourself into having these cathartic type releases. And it can be useful to burn off that energy. You're angry, you start hitting the bag. I have selling a punching bag, and I had this troubled youth group who wanted to buy it, and they wanted to buy it so that their troubled youth who were super angry could then express that anger through their fists. And I was like, guys, I'm selling you this bag. That's a really bad idea, just so you know. Like, before they hit the bag, I'd strongly suggest that they are in a happy state. Don't train them to connect their anger to punching things and expressing it that way. That's the recipe for Mike Tyson's. You know, that's like, you know, then they have 50-year healing process they have to do as a result of it. So all your emotions are the same. You indulge them, they control you. Okay? They are distractions. They are not, they're just habits. Literally just habits. Release, and they're freaking, it's nothing. Whatever, it's gone. Okay? So if that seems like something that you might not be able to